Hello, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Jerrel. I'm creating this video in response to a number of requests from the viewers. So you guys have asked me to cover this topic. If we have not yet met before, I develop games full-time for a living. In the past, I've worked in education and training as an industry consultant and in event organizing, to name a few of my career paths in the past. So I hope you'll excuse me for making this video just a little bit late here. I've been very busy. I'm developing my next commercial titles, which I'm trying to finish very quickly here. I'm working on a number of homebrew titles. I've been exploring and experimenting with different consoles, such as the Lynx, the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Game Gear. I'm setting up new video formats for this channel, creating new spaces to film. So that's taking a little bit of time, and recently I've been teaching an archery beginner's course, so my plate is quite full right now, so it takes me a bit extra time to work on these videos, so I hope you'll excuse that this is a day or two behind here. So, in general, player reception to Monster Hunter Wilds has been quite positive in response to the core game itself. The response to the game itself is positive. However, the performance of the game has a universally negative reception. I personally have not played the game, and I do not have anything in terms of personal bias for or against the game, so I will not be attacking the game, nor will I be defending it. I will just be explaining some of the aspects in terms of game development that have caused the game to end up with these sort of issues. So Monster Hunter Wilds is the highest selling game on Steam this year. This video will be approached from an educational standpoint. If you are getting into game development, or you are playing the game and wondering why it does not run well, and you're just interested, then this video is for you, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I will answer the question, can you fix the game by adjusting and tweaking settings? We're seeing many videos saying, oh, there's a typo in the config files. If you fix the typo, it fixes the game. I will address that and explain whether or not you actually can fix the game by adjusting settings. I will offer potential solutions to some of these issues that are in the game, not things that players can do, but things the developers can do to actually address these issues. So let's start with a very important explanation, and that is every game has a performance budget and a memory budget, and also a processing budget, but we'll try to keep things simple here. A game's budget for those various aspects is based quite heavily on the hardware on which the game is running, and also the game engine. Every single thing in a game has a performance cost: character models, special effects, fog, water, realistic volumetric lighting, physics simulation. All of those things have a cost. When your performance cost gets too high, the frame rate drops. So instead of getting smooth 60 frames per second, you either get a consistent drop to something like, in the 50s or 40s, or heaven forbid, lower. Other issues can cause hiccups, which result in momentary stuttering. This is something that we see in Monster Hunter Wilds, where turning the camera quickly causes the frame rate to drop significantly for a moment, and it's very noticeable. We also see glitches where full resolution textures seemingly do not load into the game, and some players have reported crashing on PC. I'm going to explain what Monster Hunter Wilds does that pushes their performance budget too far. Again, everything has a performance cost, and when you push that cost too high, that's when you get performance issues. So I'm going to explain what Monster Hunter does to push that budget too far. But first, I want to address an important topic, and that is, I know that you guys are expecting a certain kind of content from this channel. I do listen to you. I read the comments. I try to reply to as many as you can. So I do understand that I think the majority of people are not here for video game stuff, but for the pizza cupcakes. So what I will do is I will now open the box of pizza cupcakes, and I'll show you what they're all about. I'll show you what they're like inside, and then I'll pop some into the air fryer, and then I'll serve them out so that at the end of class, we can all take a quick break and enjoy some pizza cupcakes before heading out to the next class. Okay, we have a tab mechanism in the back here. These are the pizza cupcakes. This is the pepperoni variety. You can see each cupcake does appear to have one pepperoni on the surface. There is melted cheese. You may be wondering what the consistency is like in each pepperoni cupcake. I'll go ahead and pop these into the air fryer now. If you'll excuse me, I'll be right back. Okay, and we are back. Here we have a pizza cupcake. Now in an air fryer, this really only takes about 3 to 5 minutes. You don't want to overdo the pizza cupcake, but let's go ahead and just have a look. Now, what we will do is go ahead and cut the cupcake open, and we can have a look at the consistency. And we see that we have a nice, soft pastry, quite light in the middle. It's a very light pastry in the middle. Let's go ahead and give this a taste test. If you are a fan of the biscuits from KFC that are quite light on the inside and quite flaky and buttery, the consistency of the internals of the cupcake here are similar to that. If you enjoy going to ma and pa diners, as I do, the biscuits that they have there, this is quite similar to that. There is the top layer of cheese, which is quite crispy, but it is light. It's not too heavy. The pepperoni itself is not that strong. I would have recommended a stronger pepperoni, one with a bit more spice and a bit more diameter to that, but it was quite pleasant. Again, at the end of class, I will have the plate of pizza cupcakes in the back of the room. Please take just one pizza cupcake. There are about 13,000 views on this video right now, so that's a lot of people. Please be considerate of other people. Share and only take the one cupcake. You may have seconds if you can see that all 13,000 other people have had a chance to try a pizza cupcake. So, when taking a look at Monster Hunter Wilds, we see an issue where the camera turns quickly and the frame rate drops, causing the game to stutter significantly. Textures and sometimes models look low resolution and low quality. So what is occurring in the game engine to cause this? This game is made using the Re engine, and it is a proprietary engine by Capcom, so I don't have any insider information regarding the Re engine. So the issue that we are seeing is being caused by a modern game development technique called asset streaming, which can be more accurately described. Sorry, that's my phone. Hello? Thanks. Okay, I got it. Bye. So it's not pronounced Re engine, it's just RE engine. So the issue that we see is caused by asset streaming, which is more accurately described as asynchronous loading. This means that game assets such as geometry, like the character models, the environments, the textures, character animations, and audio, are loaded into memory during the game while the game is being played. In the past, we used to load everything during a loading screen. You would have to sit, look at a screen, and wait for things to load. You'll see some games still use loading screens like this, and it is unfortunate that the industry has a very damaging philosophy right now that loading screens are bad and outdated, and that we don't need them. because as a result of trying to design our games around not having loading screens, we end up with issues like we see in Monster Hunter Wilds and many other modern games as well. So, computers have to work hard in order to load assets in, but they are also unloading assets. So it's not just a matter of loading things in, it's trying to clear memory and take things out. In the case of Monster Hunter Wilds, to me it appears as if visual frustum culling method is being used, where it checks if an object is visible on screen, and where things are loaded in and out of memories based on whether or not they are within view of the camera. This is because we can look at a certain scene by moving the camera around, and as we take that in and out of the view of the camera, the frame stuttering is the same over and over again. So how asset streaming works, or asynchronous loading, how it works is first, low quality assets are loaded into the game. You see low poly count models that look kind of messed up and basic, like PlayStation 1 graphics, except worse somehow. We have low resolution textures, and as the camera gets closer to the game object, higher quality assets are loaded in. But this has a processing cost. So this is not a rendering cost, it's a processing cost. It affects the CPU, and that's what causes the frame rate to dip significantly for a moment. So the issue, what I see in this case, is that extremely high resolution textures for environments such as rocks and terrain are quite prevalent here. In the environments for this game, the texture resolution is extremely high. Now, this is problematic because these textures, they occupy a massive amount of memory of the hardware because they require multiple image files. When I say a texture, I'm referring to the material of a piece of geometry. Now, geometry is a 3D object in a game. In general, the most common image files that go into a material, again, a material just says how a piece of geometry in a game is drawn, how it's rendered. Usually there's multiple image files that go into it. There's basically always, the first one is albedo, that determines the color. For example, if my tie were to have a texture map, what determines the pattern would be the albedo map. It is the color. Then we have normal maps that dictate the bumpiness of objects. They help create a sense of depth. Then we also have specular, which gives the renderer instructions on the shininess and reflectiveness on the object. And those are the basic ones. Basically, every modern game will use those three. But there are optional image files that can be used, especially in games with realistic visual styles that are highly densely detailed, like Monster Hunter Wild. So the next image file that would go into that would be ambient occlusion. And this is what directs the renderer to how much light is expressed by the geometry. If you want certain parts of your geometry to look a bit darker, for example, under the arms of my jacket, then you would use an ambient occlusion image to sort of say, hey, not much light should be shown over there. You shouldn't express that much light. Next, we have height map, and that gives the game instructions on how to deform the geometry to make models look more detailed with height. For example, you might use a height map on a building with bricks to make the bricks actually stick out, not just look like they stick out, but to actually stick out. Height maps are quite expensive in terms of the rendering cost. Then you have detail maps, so you can have things which tile or repeat or loop. You can use this for scratches, dirt, or material details like thread or wool. You can use it for dust or damage, but detail maps, again, they have a performance cost. And then you have a detail mask, and a detail mask defines how much and where the detail map is visible on a piece of geometry. The mask goes hand in hand with the map. So all in all, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 image files for every single piece of geometry. That's what I'm seeing here in Monster Hunter Wilds. And all of those, let's say that, you know, they're 4000 or 4096 by 4096 pixels. That's absurd. But then many image files now go to 8K instead of just 4096, and it looks like that's what they're using here because they are so extremely highly dense with fidelity, and that partly causes the problem because we have this obsession with more pixels, you know, and I'll explain that a bit more later in the video. What I also see here is that the geometry, the 3D models, they're extremely high poly count, Game developers are now no longer just creating characters in 3D modeling programs. They're using programs that create characters, and they tend to create characters at extremely absurdly high poly counts. 3D models are made up of triangles or polygons. We refer to that as the poly count. The more triangles or the more polygons that something has, the more expensive it is to draw. It is a high rendering cost. And modern character creation software generates clothing that is absurdly extremely detailed. It's cinematic quality even. But when it comes to games, that has a huge cost. One technical issue that may not be easy to see just by looking at the game, but it's something that developers should understand, is texture compression. When you have textures in the game, as I described the previous image files, you have to use texture compression to basically squeeze all those files into the game. You have to compress them somehow, or they'll take up an absurd amount of space and it's not realistic. So we use texture compression. Developers have to choose what type of texture compression to use. There are many, many different methods to use when it comes to texture compression. All of them have different quirks, strengths, and weaknesses depending on the platform. So you have to have a very strong understanding of the platform, because a texture compression that works ideally on the PlayStation may not work well for the Switch, or it may not work well on PC. So you have to have a strong understanding of each individual platform and what different texture compression methods mean for each hardware. You have to manually determine which texture compression styles and technologies to use for each platform. That is an immense amount of work. In a game engine like Unity, it's quite easy to manage that, as we can manage those settings per platform, but it still means that there is a significant amount of manual work that developers have to do. So with texture compression methods, newer methods are created to reduce file size, but they are slower to decompress. In Unity, this compression method is called crunching. It is exceptional because it allows textures to be significantly smaller. There is basically a negligible difference when it comes to image quality for certain maps. You may not want to use certain compression methods for certain image files. For example, I mentioned normal maps. You don't really want to use crunching when it comes to normal maps, as there will be a significant reduction in quality, but for an albedo map, crunching is appropriate. So newer methods, again, are good at reducing the file size, but they are slower to decompress. And that means that there's the likelihood that we're seeing here is that Monster Hunter Wilds is using a modern texture compression method that is actually slow. It reduces the file size, but it takes a while for the game engine to decompress the image file and then put it into memory so that it can draw the geometry in game. Next, we see crashes. One aspect of game development that is such a challenge to deal with is something called memory fragmentation. And I believe that may be contributing to the crashes, because people report crashing on loading screens. So memory, RAM, or random access memory, is not something that you download from the internet. And in games, memory management is a little bit like Tetris. When you need to load something into a game, you have to load it into memory. It's like dropping a block of Tetris down onto your Tetris screen. And as you line up the blocks, they'll disappear, but sometimes gaps are left over in Tetris. Memory management in games is very similar. As you add and remove things from memory in a game engine, it leaves holes, and sometimes those holes can't be filled, much like how in Tetris you cover over a hole and you're no longer able to fit things into it. Normally, us game developers, we use loading screens, so we try to remove as much stuff from memory as possible. We take out anything that we don't need, and we try to clear out the memory so that we can have it as clean as possible, so that we can try to reduce memory fragmentation. Fragmentation is when we leave holes in there that we just can't clean out anymore. What happens is when you try to load more things into memory, but you have fragmentation, you have gaps that you can't fit memory into, if you reach the top of the screen in Tetris, you lose, it's game over. And it is very similar to how games work, is that if you try to load things into memory and you just haven't been able to clear out memory due to memory fragmentation, your game will crash. This happens much more prominently in certain platforms, and people are reporting that in Monster Hunter Wilds on the PC. Normally, again, with loading screens, you can handle memory fragmentation quite easily. You can clear out memory sufficiently. But in large open environments and open world games like Monster Hunter or Wilds, you cannot do that. You don't have the luxury of all of these loading screens to clear things out. There may be some loading screens used, but I have not personally played the game. I'm going based on the trailers and the gameplay that I've watched. So what are the root causes of these issues? These are just design decisions that are having an undesired effect. It's not a matter of laziness, like, oh, the game, the developers didn't care, the developers are lazy. These are complex issues, and if you don't have a very strong understanding of these, you will not be able to address these. So the root causes, really what this all comes down to, is that the games industry currently has a fixation and obsession with fidelity, because they conflate fidelity for quality. Fidelity is not quality. Fidelity is the amount of detail. You can technically have an infinite amount of detail, really. You can have more and more detail, but that detail can still be low quality. In this case, quality is the measurement of the user experience. Is the user experience positive? Is the experience good? There's an unhealthy obsession with wanting more pixels. We want more pixels, more textures, more resolution, 4 times the content. If you are not extremely careful, if you do not have a very strong understanding of how games work and how development works, if you are not careful, then instead of contributing to quality, the amount of fidelity will actually detract from quality. So what are the potential solutions that we can implement in Monster Hunter Wild from the developer side in order to address and alleviate these issues? I would strongly recommend taking a look at the texture compression method, and I would change the texture compression method for one that favors decompression speed over file size. This means that the file size of the game might be a little bit bigger. Well, it's not that it might, it will be a bit bigger, whether it might be 10% or 20% bigger. I would strongly recommend just having a bigger sized game so that you can favor decompression speed. I would say pick the fastest decompression speed that you possibly can. This will hugely cut down on the hiccuping that we see when the camera moves around. Next, I would strongly recommend identifying problematic areas of the game through manual testing, and I would designate certain environments and certain assets to stay loaded in memory unless they are manually managed to be removed from memory. So large pieces of the environment for architecture, parts of towns, as we look at the town, it stutters. As we look away from the town, it stutters. Things like that. I would manually pick those out, and I would leave them loaded into memory until the player is a certain distance away. I would check, for a distance every so often. I have an intermittent check for distance, and then I would manually manage the assets from there, because the method that they are using relies entirely on the game engine using an automated process to check if the geometry is on screen, and then it manages the asset streaming from there, and the end effect is not good. That's what's causing problems. These solutions require strong leadership, and they require less reliance on automated functions of the game engine. So this means that we have to rely more on competent and experienced developers and strong leadership who have a comprehensive understanding of how games work and how the game engine works, instead of relying on the game engine to do all of the work for you without the developers having to put more planning and understanding into it. So, can you fix the game by adjusting settings or with fan mods? And the answer to that is no. The problem is significantly deeper than what fan mods, than what settings can do. People are reporting using adjusting settings and it fixes the problem. It does not fix the problem. What adjusting your settings does is it frees up your budget. Earlier in the video, I mentioned your rendering budget, your processing budget, and your memory budget. By adjusting your game settings, you free up the budget so that things in general cost less. Things have less rendering cost. Still, that helps the game run a little smoother, but it does not actually fix the game, and it certainly will have varying levels of benefits based on the user and the hardware of their computer. So, that is basically everything that I have to offer in terms of insight and advice for the game Monster Hunter Wilds. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you've enjoyed the information here. And again, the pizza cupcakes are in the back of the room, but please be considerate of the... Oh, there's 15,000 people now. Okay, so there might not be cupcakes for everyone. Okay, I'm just gonna head to the store and pick up some more pizza cupcakes. Thanks for watching.